County Schools as provided by the Open Public Meetings Act. The meeting time has been changed to 6:30 p.m. and the meeting location changed via notice on August 4th, 2020. This will be an in-person meeting. Due to recent announcement by Governor Murphy, participation will be limited to 25 individuals. The Board of Education therefore estimates that 12 members of the public will be able to participate in person. In the effort to encourage and increase public participation, the meeting will be live streamed, and the public will be able to view live via YouTube live stream. The link is available at 6:30 p.m. by clicking on the Watch the Meeting Live icon on the Kenilworth District homepage. Public comment will be accepted only during the public comment period in the meeting in person by email to publiccomments@kenilworthschools.com. We are having problems with our telephone systems this evening. Therefore, we will allow public comment by email to be extended to the end of the meeting. If an email comes in prior to the end of the meeting, I will gladly read it prior to adjourning the meeting. For the record, please include your name and address in all public comments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ganella. Can everyone please rise to salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I have a roll call?
Biner. Here. Braun. Here. David.
Here.
Drogan.
Here.
Haberthur.
Here.
Jenkowitz.
Here.
Ladati.
Here.
Panici.
Here.
Zimmerman.
Here.
All present.
Okay, we can move to our first agenda item, which is receiving of the minutes of the secretary from our July 20th meeting. Okay, I have a motion made by Mrs. Zimmerman.
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Ladati. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion's carried. Next item is reading and acceptance of our monthly correspondence. Mr. Ganella.
We do not have public correspondence this month.
Very good. We can move on. Our next item on the agenda is our superintendent's report and presentations. Mr. Arlington.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to spend some time sharing real-time updates as to where we stand with our reopening planning. I used the same presentation frame that I created for our July 20th meeting, and I updated it with current developments. In our quest to communicate thoroughly, we continue to rely on this graphical ideal. Our restart and recovery plan has been firmed up and communicated out at the highest possible level. From now on weekly, we'll be drilling down into the next layer of information. But what hasn't changed is our reopening mission, to responsibly return all members of our school community to school in a healthy way. As you know, and as you'll see in our review of our plan, these 5 big ideas anchored our reopening efforts. You'll see them both explicitly and implicitly woven throughout our reopening materials. And what are those opening materials? The work of our reopening committees produced the raw fodder for the information we released last Thursday. These materials are now available on our website. There you'll find a roundup of more than 40 frequently asked questions, detailed fact sheets in the major committee areas, and a streamlined resource for parents, what parents need to know. I suggest parents start there as a starting point and then reference as they need the fact sheets. You'll also see on our website an acknowledgement and release for students who will be attending school through the full virtual remote learning option. And I'll speak more about that.
Yeah, you can just put it on the podium. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to put the word like this. You can hear it?
You can hear it.
Here.
This one.
Yeah. This morning I sent out this timeline so that parents know the information we're geared up to send this week. Beginning this Thursday, I'll be sending weekly principal updates that hash out building level specifics. Let me backtrack though and say Wednesday, in response to parent requests, we have a fact sheet that provides more information on virtual and remote learning. And then when we have a need, as we usually do, we'll send on Friday a sort of roundup of information in our Friday folder. At our July meeting, I outlined how additional personnel support will help with our new safeguards and efforts we're engaged in. I also provided more details to the board in a recent board level update about Care Plus. On tonight's agenda, you'll be voting on that contract with Care Plus, the additional nurse, and the technology facilitator. I want to spend some time, though, drilling down into the building schedules. So Harding School will have school 5 days a week on a modified schedule. Staggered drop-offs will be based on students' last names and pick up by grade level. We'll be sharing those details in a couple weeks. As a reminder, as I said in July, no lunch in school, but grab and go will be available for all students. To maximize students' instructional time, specials will be taught asynchronously after school. And because that 4 hours is really precious time, some instructional non-negotiables will be ELA, SEL, social emotional learning, and math. And right now there are teams of people working together to create resources for mindfulness, brain breaks, and mass breaks as embedded parts of the day. Here's what a sample schedule might look like for Harding. And again, you see some of those mainstays of instruction, the SEL, the 90 minutes of ELA, 16 minutes of math, and then time for mass breaks, mindfulness, etc. So the 16 minutes for math, for example, might not be at the very start of the year, right? It's hard to ask a first grader to engage in 60 minutes of math. They may be working towards that over the course of the year. And additionally, it may not be 60 contiguous minutes, but hopefully it will add up to these rough sketches of time. In order to understand both building schedules, but particularly Brearley's, which I'm about to spotlight now, it behooves us to spend some time differentiating between synchronous and asynchronous, right? So synchronous live instruction, that might look like students connecting with teachers via Zoom or Google Meet. Asynchronous, using learning management systems like Seesaw or Google Classroom. Students may have access to screencasts. I'm more book smart than I am a handyman. So when I change a faucet, right, I look at YouTube over and over again. That's an example of asynchronous learning. Keep those definitions in mind while we look at the Brearley schedule. So for Brearley, students are grouped into blue and gold cohorts. The cohorts report for in-person instruction on an every other day basis. This allows for social distancing, a 50% reduction in class sizes, plus the amount of percent of students who are going to stay home, right? We anticipate that no academic classroom will exceed 14 students, and the schedule for Brearley will run 4 periods per day for about 55 minutes. This is important to note, though, that students, when they're home, are also participating in synchronous instruction. We think that this allows for quality instructional time, and we're able to keep the academic program intact with more fidelity. Remote students will follow the same schedule and will participate in synchronous learning every day. So let me walk you through an example. If I was a Brearley student, since my last name is Arlington, I would be in the blue cohort, which means I have, suppose, period 1 English, period 2 math, period 3 social studies, and period 4 art. Because my mom wants me to come to in-person instruction, I'm sitting in a desk for those 4 class periods. But on a gold day, when I'm home, I'm still dialed in to my English, math, social studies, and art class because I'm either Zooming in or live streaming in so that I'm not missing any content or access to that content. Periods 5, 6, 7, and 8, kids will still have those responsibilities for those classes, but in asynchronous ways. So it's a 4-day rotation, and on the 5th day, the schedule restarts at day 1. So if you're in the blue cohort, in week 1, you're in class 3 days a week, and on the 2nd week, the gold cohort is in class 3 days a week. If you're a fully remote student at Brearley, you're following the same schedule, you're just following it virtually, remotely, from home. Does that make sense? Yeah. In any building, right, those The first and last grade levels where you welcome students in and out of school are unique because they're not like any other grade levels. And that remains true in Harding for grades pre-K and 6. So 6th grade, right, is a middle school grade, but housed in our elementary school. So we're still working through the details of what 6th grade looks like, but we could expect that it may look more like Burley than Harding. Preschool is an animal unto itself. We still need to provide virtual instruction for preschoolers per the NJ DOE guidance, and there are parents who are asking for that. But as you know, there's not a whole lot of direct instruction in preschool. It's learning through play, so we have to figure out what that looks like, but we'll have more details in the upcoming days. Depending on student enrollment, in grades K through 5, it's possible and highly likely that we'll be able to have one virtual teacher per grade level. So if you are one of the 15 students in 2nd grade who are choosing the remote learning option, you may be grouped together in Mr. Arlington's 2nd grade class. In grades 6 to 12, that's a little more complex based on teacher certifications, what the kids need, the nuances of the schedule. So it's highly probable that all teachers in those grade levels will need to provide for virtual instruction. And here's what it might look like. It might look like live streaming lessons using the camera or camera in the computer, but an important caveat is that that camera will be focused on the teacher or the teacher's screen, right, or what the computer screen or what she's projecting, because cameras can't be owling about the classroom because of student privacy issues. That's one model we may see. Another is a flipped classroom, right? So the night before I watch that video on fixing the faucet, and then the next day I come to school and talk about it or practice it or receive more instruction in it. And 2 and 3 are pretty closely tied together, right? The teacher may be engaged in a mini lesson. The kids at home will see the computer screen or the teacher or the board. Then the teacher will need to circulate about the classroom for the practice or application piece, and then get to those kids on Zoom too. So it is going to be a little bit of a juggling act. All right, parents who don't wish for a child to attend school, there is a waiver that we released, and that's due this Friday. I get the feeling that survey fatigue is real, so I chose not to do another survey. This acknowledgement and release is really important because that's the way we'll find out who's coming back and who's not. At this time, there's about a 20%, about 20% of our students or families are saying they're keeping their child home for virtual instruction. But due to scheduling difficulties, we do need to have these timeframes for when we can welcome students back in if they chose the remote option and then change their mind or feel their circumstance has changed and they want to join us in school in person. I pride myself on making decisions on a case-by-case basis, but here's one we're really going to have to toe the line on, because one student who comes, who chooses virtual and then comes back to school, that could have a pretty significant implication on class sizes or the classroom environment, and we need time to prepare for that. So what you'll see here, the first date is tied to Burley's first marking period and very close to Harding's first trimester. In the upcoming weeks, there will be more dates, and we'll continue to try to tie them around the change of marking period, but we kind of also need to see how that works before we commit to that.
Nothing like that in the reverse, though. I would, if they're deciding they want in school, and then as they get closer to it, they think about it again, or the numbers start going wonky, and they think, you know what, no, I'm going to keep my kid home. They
Yeah.
can't do that.
So we're looking into that. So you'll see a policy, I think I summarized it for the policy committee on remote virtual learning. We were really focused for the first read on from the remote to the in-person, but the policy that Strauss Esme kind of gave to us does make allowances for, to your point, the converse. But there needs to be a window around that too. We just need to figure out what that is, because you can imagine how disruptive it would be, right, for kids to come in and out each day, not just for health and wellness measures, but for curriculum and instructional matters too. So, yeah. So we released the FAQs and the suite of documents on Thursday. As you might imagine, I've gotten a lot of input. These are the biggest trending questions. I just wanted to hit them head on here. and that is there will be aftercare. In Harding's weekly update this week, we'll be sharing more information about that. Lots of wondering about children's classroom teacher and supply list, but that's really tentative until August 14th, right? If there are a lot of students who were slated to be in my class that are now going to be on virtual learning, we need to rejigger the classes. And so that's not going to happen until after the 14th. Braille students will get their one-to-one Chromebooks prior to the start of the school year, and we are figuring out what orientations look like for critical transitional grade levels like kindergarten and 7th grade. The other frequent question I received was related to how we will respond to possible cases of COVID-19. I've been in ongoing contact since March with Kenilworth's health officer, Mr. Gappis. School districts across Union County, I've been told, will be using this same guidance to make health-related decisions by using these Union County municipal COVID-19 school community containment guidelines. We just got this version, I think, just a couple days ago. They take possible situations, including a confirmed case, a probable case, a case of reported symptoms, and close contact, and outline possible containment responses. While it's great that supposedly the whole county will be using this, it's still just a guide, and we'll need to confer with the health officer and our own medical officials to implement these containment responses. I know a lot of parents are very curious, as are teachers, about this. This document is, as I mentioned, kind of hot off the press, and I will be sending it out for transparency's sake so everyone has access to the same information. These are the protocols that are still in development, and we should have more by way of the next couple weeks. We're looking at pre-screening health checks. While we're still figuring that out, we're heavily leaning towards students pre-screening using the Genesis portal, and teachers should expect to use the Frontline ASOP system. That's in addition to some time spent in the opening days of school where the nurses can help teachers work through possible signs and symptoms of students as an additional layer after the Genesis portal pre-screen. Building logistics, as I kind of alluded to earlier, and then additional health and safety protocols. I presented this in July. I thought it was worth mentioning again. We continue to offer Summer Professional Learning Institute. I realize that we need to give space and place to teachers in the opening weeks and months and probably throughout the school year to adjust curriculum and resources, right? Because teaching and learning is going to look different, and so too is the pace of instruction, which is why we'll need to rely on pre-assessments more. And then we'll continue with a multi-tiered system of supports for academic interventions, but also for social and emotional interventions and behavioral interventions too. A big sort of question mark is, how ready are we if we need to pivot, on a dime to distance learning? So the C&I team, along with their committee members and other teachers, have reflected on lessons learned from the spring. I've intaked a lot of parent feedback about ways we can strengthen that process, and all of those enhancements live in a distance learning guidebook that we're currently workshopping. After workshopping the guidance, if we need to use it, we'll be making that public. But as a preview, here's what you can expect, right? This is based on the feedback, more live instruction, a more consistent schedule, enhanced access to teachers within reason, and then additional delineation of what is everyone's responsibility as part of distance learning. And again, this is if we're in the same environmental situation this upcoming school year as we were in the spring. An additional prong of the work are the efforts coming out of the Department of Student Personnel Services. So classified students with IEPs will have schedules that match their needs. This is being determined currently by team members. We'll continue with interdepartmental coordination of services. And then we have an SEL team that's really building a lot of content for teachers and parents so that there's connectivity between home and school efforts. So we'll be looking to share out those social emotional essentials shortly. But as I said earlier, sort of coming full circle here, I think it's worth repeating. In response to parents' requests for more information about what virtual remote learning looks like, we have an additional fact sheet geared up to go out Wednesday, the first in a series of principal updates Thursday, and then all that information, in case you missed it, will go out in our Friday folder. I continue to chip away at the emails that come directly to me through the fall 2020 email account we have set up. But we know the best laid plans, right? No matter how hard we try to gear up for this upcoming school year, we still need to hold our practices and protocols under a microscope in real time and exhibit those characteristics of nimbleness and responsiveness that we know we'll need in order to keep everyone safe this upcoming school year. Those are, all the updates kind of fit to print, but I'm happy to take questions, Mr. David, from the board now in anticipation of the public asking questions too.
Does any board member have a question? Mr. Jankwitz.
Plans for cleaning the classrooms after the students are there for the day. How's that going to work?
Yeah. So, let me tell my back too. Sure. Cleaning the classrooms after students depart for the day? Yeah. So part of the work of the Health and Wellness Committee was to develop, through the Office of Buildings and Grounds, stringent protocols. So for those looking to learn more about that, the Health and Wellness fact sheet will kind of allude to a cleaning plan we have in place. And then also, by adding to our personnel, right, in buildings and grounds, we feel we may be able to better upkeep the cleaning that needs to be done.
Curious, in the Harding setup you had in the working snack,
Yeah.
0 minutes, obviously, because it's working snack. So is that working into that math segment, that recess segment, and how are we going to accomplish that if the kids have to have the masks on inside?
Yeah, so tomorrow, great question. Tomorrow I'm meeting with the nurses to make sure we have some firm protocols in place. While weather permits, the working snack could be outside during the mask break, right? But we need to come up with some guidelines for what that looks like in the classroom with the masks. Maybe they're not all doing it at the same time. I want to allow for teachers to have flexibility, but even outside of a pandemic, sometimes working snack becomes an issue because of allergens or dietary needs that kids have. So these are all issues that need to be worked through. I mean, it's unrealistic really to think that the working snack will be 0 minutes, but I was trying to show how we need to prioritize ELA, math, and the SEL check-ins.
And then, in the same vein, with food, and I know it seems crazy to be thinking about it, but even at middle and high school level, I know, for example, my own daughter, when she was that age, grammar school, she ate her breakfast, not a problem. She became a teenager, early morning, not so hungry. If I got something small into her before she went out the door for the 8 o'clock start, or 7:30 start, when it was earlier, I was lucky. And then somewhere around mid-morning, she needed a granola bar or whatever that she brought with her. What do we do for those kids? Because, going from 8:30 in the morning start time, meaning they left somewhere between 8 and 8:30 to return to school, to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, is a long haul for growing kids. I mean, especially teenage boys that, eat everything in sight on a regular basis.
Yeah. To be honest, Ms. Zimmerman, I had not thought of that, but I can bring that, it's a really valid point, I can bring that up to Mr. Davies and Dr. Lott to see how we work through that.
It's hard for them sometimes to concentrate on
Yeah,
the work.
sure.
They're hungry.
No, it's a great point. Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Arlington?
Oh, sorry, Paula.
There's a call? Oh, Paulette, sorry.
Yeah, so thanks. So daily, parents will need to confirm via our student information system, Genesis, that their children are symptom-free. And then we'll need to, that data will be reported back to us. We'll either need to ping, right, those kids who are in, coming up but have not been cleared, and then follow up as needed.
So the parents are going to take the
Yes.
And only the schools that do that. See, I have a problem with that because I don't know the parents, I don't know what they do. Anyway, just a thought, I think
Sure.
people their own.
If
Or
there-
trusting the people who,
Yeah, I mean, we trusted you to fill out the questionnaire today, right? It's kind of asking adults to do the same thing. Yeah. There's a lot of issues, right? So you have to measure health and wellness safeguards, right? With loss of instructional time of taking, when you only have a 4-hour day, of taking 700 kids' temperatures, right? And when you do that, they're already in school and potentially sick. And then you need to work through student privacy issues, right? When a kid is sick, how are you handling that without ostracizing or embarrassing him at the schoolyard gates, if you will? Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Arlington? Okay. Thank you, Kyle.
Can I just, President David, just make a couple notes about the agenda?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. By way of sharing some short comments on tonight's agenda, I'd like to point out a few noteworthy pieces of information. Slated for approval tonight, you'll see memorandums of agreement for all 3 units of the Kenilworth Education Association. I'm grateful that a contract agreement has been struck, particularly as we enter perhaps our toughest school year to date. Thank you to Mr. Ganella, negotiations chairperson Mr. Ladati, as well as committee members, Mrs. Braun, Mrs. Drogan, and Mr. Haberther. I'd also like to thank the KEA leadership and their negotiating team on the many hours spent in the process. I believe that a settled contract is a show of good faith on both sides that we can work together and must as part of a larger school community that cares for and is devoted to kids. Also on tonight's agenda, you'll note a healthy list of teachers who signed up and participated in our Summer Learning Institute. I'm deeply pleased with the participation rate and believe it shines a spotlight on our continued efforts to enhance professional learning and our effort to offer such learning in different ways. I think it equally reveals the dedication of our teachers to hone their craft and enhance their practice. Finally, I point the group's attention to the resignation of 2 support staff members tonight, Mrs. Tina Lanau and Mr. Mike Ringler, who are leaving for other professional or personal opportunities. They've been with us 12 years and 6 years, respectively. I've gotten the chance to know each of them a bit, and I want to thank them both for their service to the children of Kenilworth. That concludes my report.
Okay. Thank you very much. We will move on to report of committees, review of resolutions, and board discussion. And first up is Finance and Facilities, Mr. Ladati.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Here's my report. Preparations for the annual audit continue with the orders scheduled, and they're scheduled to come into the district the week of August 24th. Mr. Ganella will work on the schedule to limit their in-person visits to be compliant with COVID office rules that are in effect. The district suffered several issues due to the aftermath of the hurricane last week. The tree on the boulevard is needed to be removed. The building also lost power for several days, making it difficult for the entire staff that was here to function. The classrooms are rapidly being cleaned and will be ready for the opening of this new school year. Mr. Vanderzee and his staff have been fine-tuning the HVAC systems for reopening. The systems are looking good and in good shape. Tonight there are 11 resolutions for your consideration. The first 4 are the normal monthly fare. I reviewed the financials and find them to be in order. As for number 4, a line item transfer, there was none that reached our $5,000 cap. However, there were several that where we had to move some dollars because of COVID cleaning and medical supplies for COVID. Number 5, and Mr. Arlington spoke about it, was the virtual. You see, majority, if not all the staff, are attending the virtual Summer Learning Institute. The cost of that is found in resolution number 26. 6, 7, and 8, approval of the MOAs. Based on the arduous task facing the district with COVID and bringing in new leadership with the principals. As a committee, along with the superintendent and business administrator, we knew how important it was to reach an agreement prior to the start of this school year. The MOAs for the approval is for a one-year contract with the teachers, secretaries and aides, and custodians. And again, as Mr. Arlington, I want to thank Ryan, Janine, Paulette, along with Superintendent Arlington and Mr. Ganella for all the time we put in to reach this in a pretty quick time frame. 9, 10, and 11 are all COVID-related issues. Number 11 deals with our loss of $102,000 in state aid, along with the committee's recommendation of option 4, which is embedded in that resolution. I could ask Mr. Ganella if you want to maybe speak on number 4 a little bit, or if you want. And that's the end of my report, so I will leave the podium for Mr. Ganella.
What if there's questions?
I will go back up.
Thank you, Mr. Lagotti. So resolution number 4 is required, the state is requiring us to provide them a detail of how we are taking into account the loss of the state aid that we found out about in the spring of $102,639. They basically allowed us 4 different options. The first one was to use appropriation from free balance. It was my recommendation that that is not a viable option for the school district. If you recall, in an effort to reduce the tax levy back in the spring, we were already using a substantial amount of free balance, and then we additionally appropriated an additional $150,000 to reduce that even further. That basically brought our free balance almost down to 0, so we do not, number 1, have the money available to do that. And even if we did, I wouldn't recommend doing the appropriation from free balance, because that would just set us up into a bad situation next year, compounding an already difficult fiscal year that we're going to be going into 21-22. The second option was a viable option, allowable by the state, to use our emergency funds, our emergency reserve funds. We have $250,000 in emergency reserve, and the governor was allowing us to use that for this purpose. It wasn't my recommendation to use it to overcome the loss of state aid. However, I want to try to reserve those funds for COVID-related expenses that might occur in the future. Every day is becoming more and more of a challenge as we progress, whether it be the purchasing of PPEs or certain equipment to disinfecting equipment, or renovations to the facilities, or possibly the potential of additional staff that may be needed, and substitutes that may be needed. So I want to try to reserve that $250,000 specifically for COVID-related expenses that might come down the road. If we don't use it, that's great, in multiple ways. The third option was also a viable option. It allowed us to make adjustments to other than COVID-related expenses, many of which were eligible for FEMA assistance. A lot of our expenditures we do plan on getting reimbursed through FEMA. So the third option allowed for us to take money out of maintenance reserve. Though it's viable, I don't think it's doable under our certain constraints. The fourth option is also viable, and it's reflected in the recommendation in the resolution this evening, which basically allowed us to make adjustments to the actual appropriations side of the budget, meaning making budget cuts to make up the difference of that $102,000. So that basically came from 2 areas of the appropriation side of the budget. It was $75,000 that we used for the health benefits. If you recall, during the budget cycle, we budgeted 1.75% based on our renewal. Our renewal for health benefits came in 0%. That is a $75,000 savings that we will use to close that gap a little further. And then the additional $27,000 will be coming from an additional, in the memorandum agreement that the Board of Education is signing this evening, the association made an adjustment to tuition reimbursement So we'll have some savings there as well. So that's how we plan on coming up with that $102,000 in lost estate aid.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Ladati or Mr. Ganella on that resolution he just went over? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to personnel. Mr. Haberthur.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have 17 resolutions to go through. Resolutions 12 and 13 are the aforementioned resignation/retirement. 14, 15, and 16 are the employment of a technology facilitator, social studies teacher, and a registered nurse. 17 through 22 are maternity leave replacements. 23 is revised maternity absence. 24 is the employment of paraprofessional lunch aides. Number 25 is the approval of 2020-2021 stipends. 26 is the approval of summer professional development. And 27 is the approval of professional development presenters. And 28 is the payment of unused sick days for a recently retired staff member. Does anybody have any questions?
Mr. Haberthur, do you want to make mention of the Personnel Committee meeting that's scheduled, or no? Obviously, I just broke.
We are having a personnel committee. It's today, right?
Yes, after the meeting.
Yeah, we'll be meeting after. Any other questions? Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, thank
Sorry
you.
to put you on the spot. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Haberthur? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to curriculum and instruction. Mrs. Zimmerman.
Okay, everybody, not a whole lot to go over with curriculum and instruction. We did actually have a curriculum meeting on July 29th, but most of that material was already covered in Mr. Arlington's presentation regarding the reopening of school. We spent a great deal of time that evening going over the changes and issues that we felt needed to be addressed for any virtual learning segments of the reopening, whether it be all virtual, if God forbid that should be the case, or the virtual part that does have to exist, from teacher accountability to student accountability to more live action, so to speak, interaction between students and teachers. And everything else that he already covered. Chromebooks we talked about, so we're all set with that. For the resolutions, resolution number 29 regards payment of a stipend for curriculum writing. Resolution number 30 is to adopt curriculum for an instrumental music 7-8 class, advanced painting, and the 7th grade SEL cycle. And 31 is to adopt the HIB June report, to accept the June HIB report.
Any questions for Mrs. Zimmerman? Okay,
Good.
seeing no one, we will move on to policy review. And Mrs. Braun.
Good evening. There are several resolutions under policy this month. Resolution 32 is to approve a job description for a lead maintenance mechanic position. It's a stipend position. Resolution 33 is first reading of several policies. Policy 0155.1, board member participation at board meetings using electronic device. It outlines the parameters that we'll use to allow a board member to participate in a meeting remotely should the need arise. Policy 1648 is regarding the Restart and Recovery Plan. It's mandated. It's a policy guide that includes the areas in the New Jersey Department of Education guidance that require a policy, in the areas that indicate a school district must take specific action in. The adoption of this one policy that addresses these NJDOE guidance is preferable for streamlining purposes. This policy guide will only be in effect through the current COVID-19 pandemic. Policy 164802 is regarding remote learning options. It's another mandated policy. And it's in response to our return to school and supplemental mandate of an anticipated minimum standard that families and guardians may submit, and school districts shall accommodate requests for full-time remote learning. Policy 1649 is the Federal Families First COVID-19 Response Act. It is another mandated policy. It outlines guidance on the Emergency Family and Medical Leave and Expansion Act and the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, and how employees in public schools are to handle paid sick time and family leave as it relates to COVID-19. Then there is Resolution 34, which is for revisions to adopt certain revisions to policies and regulations. The first regulation is Regulation 9150 regarding school visitors. It outlines that no visitors are going to be allowed in the schools until the pandemic restrictions are lifted. However, a principal can admit a visitor if necessary. That visitor would be subject to the same screening protocol and would be required to wear a mask unless accommodation is needed. Policy 2431.3 is heat participation for athletes, student athletes' safety. It's a mandate, and this one mandates compliance with the heat participation policy. It was previously optional for districts to participate in. Policy 2622 is student assessment, and the major change to that was that the district is required to administer an elementary school level statewide assessment for science through 5th grade. It was previously only through 4th grade. And policy and regulation 5200 regarding attendance, it's mandatory. Parents shall be required to notify schools when students will not be at school. And it just cleans up some other language within that policy and regulation. Thank you.
Okay.
Questions?
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mrs. Braun?
No.
Okay. We can move on to old business. Does anyone have anything to bring up under old business? Okay, seeing nothing, we'll move on to new business. Does anyone have anything? I see Mr. Biner's hand up.
Right. First, I just want to say kudos to everybody who's involved in putting their 2 cents in regarding reopening plans. Just want to ask a question for the superintendent regarding sports. Because the big news in sports today is apparently some big time football conferences are going to be canceling the 2020 season, the Big Ten or Rutgers plays. So when I heard that, I was curious about, are we considering canceling all those sports as long as we're in this pandemic? Are we considering canceling sports where the kids cannot socially distance and can't wear a mask like football?
So right now, we're still in phase 1, right, where they're just kind of conditioning. But we're taking our guidance from the NJSIAA right now. But certainly it's a conversation. Whether we move to phase 2 or not, or if that's even allowable, I think is going to be determined in the upcoming weeks.
But if the trend says you can play football, we can on our own say it's too dangerous, we're not going to play this year.
Yeah, we could absolutely have a conversation at the board level.
Okay, just curious. I saw that colleges are starting to do that. You know, it's pretty dangerous to me. It's pretty dangerous to play football. So, thanks.
Any other questions under new business? Okay, then we can move on to opening the meeting to the public. Can I get a motion to open the meeting to the public? Okay, I have a motion made by Dr. Panici. Did I get a second? Second by Mrs. Braun. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, the meeting is open to the public for comment. Mr. Ganella will instruct the public on how they can make comment.
As I stated to the board, earlier, the public did not hear us because we were having some audio problems at the time. We do have some technical issues with our telephone system in the board conference room. We ran some wires in here, and they're not totally working correctly. If you'd like to make a comment, you could still email the board at publiccomments@kenilworthschools.com. That's publiccomments@kenilworthschools.com. I'll repeat it again. publiccomments@kenilworthschools.com. There is going to be a delay between the live feed and us, so we will leave the, if an email comes in at any point during the meeting, we do not currently have any emails, but if it comes back at any point during the meeting, prior to adjourning, we will address those comments. So you have some time to get those in, but don't waste too much time because we don't have that much more business to do this evening. So if you can email us in the next 10 to 15 minutes, we'd appreciate that, and we will try to address your comments. Thank you. Once again, publiccomments@kenilworthschools.com. Thank you.
Okay, well, since we're leaving it open, I guess we don't make a motion to close the public portion of the meeting? Oh, just before, okay. Very good, thank you. Okay, so then can I have a motion to close the public portion of the comment at this particular time? I have a motion made by Mr. Haberthur. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Jankowicz. All those in favor, say aye. 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 Anyone opposed? Okay, public comment is closed for the moment, and we can move on to roll call of resolutions. Mr. Ganella.
I've been monitoring my private comments and by some people from staff members who are keeping in touch. We do understand that the audio is not the greatest. First of all, part of the COVID requirements is we have the HVA system on at full blast, so that is probably some of the sound that you hear in the background. Then in addition, we have these things called face coverings on our faces, which definitely muffle our sound. So we do apologize for that, but we are working through the world of COVID. The resolutions on this evening's, first up is finance. We have resolutions 1 through 11. I'm going to break them out, so resolutions number 6, 7, and 8 can be voted on separately. Okay, so this is for resolutions 1 through 11, excluding 6, 7, and 8. Do any others need to be voted on separately? No? Okay. So once again, we're voting on resolutions 1 through 11, excluding 6, 7, and 8.
Do you need someone to move it, or no?
Oh, yes, Mr. Ladati, would you like to move that? Well, yeah, would you like to move the resolutions?
Would you like to move?
That was more of a Zoom issue, but yeah.
Okay.
Would you like to make those motions? Okay, is there a second? Second. Mrs. Braun, okay. Mr. Biner? Yes. Braun? Yes. Drogan? Yes. Haberthur? Yes. Jankowicz? Yes. Ladati? Yes. Panici?
Yes.
Zimmerman?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Okay. Motion's carried unanimously. This is resolutions number 6, 7, and 8 on the agenda. Biner? Yes. Braun? Yes. Drogan?
Yes.
Haberthur?
Yes.
Jankowicz?
Yes.
Ladati? Yes. Panici?
Yes.
Abstain.
Abstain, sorry.
That's okay. Zimmerman?
Yes.
Abstain.
Abstain on Marie.
Abstain. I thought, in my understanding in the past, with negotiations, we can't be involved in the actual negotiating, but once something comes to a final vote before the board, you're allowed to vote.
Okay.
That's the way it's always been.
I'll
Change your-
abstain
do you
because
want
I
to
don't
change
know.
it?
I'll abstain.
Okay.
I don't know what the negotiations are.
Okay.
is all I'm saying.
And Mr. David?
Yes.
Okay. Motion's carried. And this is for resolutions number 12 through 28 on the agenda. Do any of those need to be voted on separately? No? Okay, is there a motion to, Mr. Haberthur, would you like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion of resolutions 12 through 28.
Is there a second? Mrs. Drogan? Second? Okay, Mr. Biner?
Yes.
Braun? Yes. Drogan?
Yes.
Haberthur?
Yes.
Jankowitz. Ladati. Panici.
Yes.
Zimmerman. David.
Yes.
Motion's carried. This is for resolutions number 29 through 31 on the agenda. Mrs. Zimmerman, would you like to make a motion?
I would like to move resolution 29 through 31.
Is there a second? Second. Mr. Biner, seconds. Biner.
Yes.
Braun.
Yes.
Drogan.
Yes.
Haberther.
Yes.
Jankowitz. Ladati. Panici.
Yes.
Zimmerman.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Motion carries. And finally, this is for resolutions number 32 through 34 on the agenda. Are there any separate exclusions? No? Mrs. Braun, would you like to make the motion?
I'd like to make a motion for resolutions 32 through 34.
Second? Okay. Seconded by Mrs. Drogan. Biner.
Yes.
Braun.
Yes.
Drogan.
Yes.
Haberther.
Yes.
Jankowitz. Ladati. Panici.
Yes.
Zimmerman. David.
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Okay. Do we have a need to go into executive session, Mr. Ganell?
No, we do not.
We do not. Okay. Then I guess the next item is to return to public portion? No, there are
no
none?
emails on the list other than my test.
Okay. So we've just been informed that there are no email communications coming in from the public. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Okay. I have a motion made by Mr. Haberther. Was that a second by Mr. Jankowitz? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The meeting is adjourned.